And recording is started. Yeah, so we've got a couple of agenda items today, but I'll kick it off. I've got the first one. So we run into some Golang protobuf issues. It turns out that the Go protobuf guide explicitly calls out vendoring protobufs into your code as a problem. It's popped up for us because we pull in Substrate Go for Go stuff, but we also pull in the protobuf library directly to be able to generate extensions and use Substrate sockets and extensions. And also because we're using Substrate Java and Substrate Rust, we've got multiple versions floating around. And it turns out that if you pull in a second version of the protobufs, if they're not the same version, you get namespace conflicts in your Go builds. Um,
Sounds very familiar because I'm dealing with that problem.
oh, good. Okay. Well,
No,
not
no, no,
good,
not
but
not
like,
Go, but any sort of like DLL package hell.
yeah. So I guess the docs explicitly call out the vendoring, so I think we want to propose on our end, like making a standalone package for just the protos effectively, so we can have like Substrate, ProtoGo, whatever version, the same version as the Substrate spec, pull that in as a library into like Substrate Go, and I believe that should fix the issues. It also lets us
Well,
theoretically
you
use.
have the same problem though. You still have your extensions. You just moved it to a different library that you have a problem with.
Yes, but then in theory, what we could do is in Substrate Go, we don't depend on Substrate version, whatever the library is using. We use Substrate version, the most recent one. We can use a little more recent, like a more recent version.
But you have to build the extensions. I mean, which means you have to build the protos. You can't use a library if you're building your own, unless you have a branch of the library.
We don't. But if the library doesn't depend on the vendor proto, but depended on a version
Yeah,
of the proto.
you're saying if it's in two packages, you can swap out one of the packages and not have a problem.
Yes, I believe that's the case.
Yeah,
So
like
you
he's saying, I want to swap out the proto package. I don't want to swap out the Substrate Go package.
Okay,
But
so you swap out the proto package and Go it will just use the swapped out version. Right,
Yes.
the substrate. Okay, yeah, I guess that's reasonable.
And
so
actually, I think
Substrate
that
Go
pattern might
protobuf.
actually go ahead.
So like Substrate Go protobuf.
Effectively, yeah. Substrate Go protobuf, which is just released with the on each spec change. Substrate Go depends on a specific version of it, and then we can provide the more recent one if we want to. And I actually think
Yeah.
that pattern might be good for every other language as well, like Java and Rust, to actually have like generate the protobuf binding packages as their own things and then import them as libraries. Because that in theory also makes all of the automated machinery for like update stuff. So the whatever the GitHub bot is that like suggests updates, if it's just a
Kind of
new
bug.
package
Yeah.
that we've published, it can be like, oh, there's a new package, try applying it. And then that also makes up, yeah, the vendor stuff is kind of annoying to update versus just having the package. But yeah, I guess this is have to be saying, hey, if we were to do something along those lines, would there be any objections? And it sounds like not really. Cool. Awesome.
It's only weird in Go. I mean, I guess it's weird in Rust too, but like it's these languages where the packages are tied to the repos.
Yeah. I was looking at
Like
that and it's like, wait, does that mean I need a
like in
separate
Java, it's
repo?
fine. We just make two jar files and like okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like you don't need separate repos.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I need a separate repo for Substrate Go or I turned the core Substrate repo into the package repo for the protos. But I don't know if I need to include the generated protobuf code in the library or in the package. I'm going to talk with someone who actually is using Go and also the person who's dealing with our own build hell because of this to do what they suggest.
Yeah, in Go, you should just be able to like have, we're just gonna have to make a second repo. It's just the protobuf.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that then. Yeah. And then that's that topic unless anyone has any more issues with protobufs themselves and other places.
The only other thing I have on Go is it's a little weird where we've thrown Go some of the Go up at the top level in Substrate Core because that was easier to create the module there, but really the module should be in a subdirectory. So if we're maybe not as part of this, but at some point I'd like to push the Go files that have been thrown up at the top down a level. They contain the
That even
embedded file
possible?
system, which contains the extensions in YAML. Yeah, I've done it with other things.
Yeah.
So it's just basically pushing it down a directory in the, so
But
instead of it.
but there's a way to tell Go package manager that it's in a subdirectory.
Yeah. Yeah, it would work with a subdirectory.
Can we do that with the protobuf stuff too? Then the problem that Victor's trying to solve, rather than creating a second repo, if you can push a Go package into a subdirectory rather than being at the top level of the repo, we could have two packages inside the Go Substrate Go. The top
Yeah,
level one and then potentially one inside of that, or no?
yeah, that's worth looking at.
Can you publish them at different versions?
There's
That's
no publishing in Go.
Oh, it's just that you tag it as like it's the get tag. Okay, so yeah, this is okay, cool.
Just tags. Like, it's all source code. Like there's no binaries that Go distributes.
This is what Basil does to your brain.
What's that?
This is what Basil does to your brain.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it.
Basil is all source too, right?
Basil is like modern Maven. That's what I think of it as.
I have strong Basil skills. I don't know if I should say that, but I do.
I feel like that's an oxymoron.
I have rewritten, yeah, maybe. But I have written lots of low level code in order to make things work. To create my own packages, package types and
Not to get too into it, part of the reason we would like to separate packages is that someone internally has done some horrible things with Basil that I do not comprehend, and we would like to stop doing that. Anyways, I think that's enough on the library. Next actually agenda item is a separate thing, which is about the distribution property and how does it work, which I asked a question about it in the Slack. Where, oh God, did I put in the discussion? Yeah, and Young Troll also came up when we were looking at the his changes to the hash join equality operator, which is like, how are those properties maintained? It seems a little underspecified based on how I understand it. Let me pull up the actual question I had.
yeah.
Like, yeah, we
Distribution.
find there's a partition
think-
property. It's like, okay, the data is split along partitions. But then we say that things like sort, for example, preserve the partitioning. But then how is data sorted? If you have data partitioned not on the sort key, doesn't that technically need to be repartitioned on the sort key in order to sort correctly? And there's like other questions there.
No, the data can be sorted even if it's partitioned, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can have, like, let's say we did the worst case scenario where it's ordered partitions, right? So it's like A through N or A through M and N through Z, right? So that's two partitions of data. Each of those two partitions could be independently sorted. But those are in fact sorted even though they're partitioned. But I think that one of the issues I'm guessing is that I think that there are places, and I'm wanting to sort as one of them, where originally we didn't allow expressions, and then later we added expressions. And so, and I think people have not. I think that all of the stuff about distribution and sortedness properties were written originally and not maintained since, is my guess. And so if someone changed a simple operation, like aggregate used to be like you could only aggregate on fields. Like you can only group by A or group by B. You can group by A plus B, for example, at least in the aggregate relation. And so I'm guessing that the sort one probably used to say like you can only sort by direct references.
Yeah.
And then later we added expressions. And so this comment about like how this stuff is maintained.
But I guess
Yeah, I guess no, that's right. Actually, distribution property only remapped based on emid, which basically means that like if like sort doesn't change the distribution, right? Like just check.
But I guess the thing that I'm wondering is, cool, you have a sort that's distributed, cool. Okay, you sort the data locally in each partition. And then at some point you're reading the output of that data, maybe like multiple operations later. If the plan is saying, hey, this data should be sorted, like in the sort row, I would assume that cool, the output should be in sorted order. But doesn't that mean that like multiple layers up when you're pulling the data out, that you have to like pull it per partition into the merged or
Well, it
Yeah, you
depends
need
on
you need
like
to have a
what's in between, really, right?
yeah. So remember, it's basically like a distribution is really like creating many sets from one set. Okay, and so in order to you're saying, hey, if I want something to be sorted and I want to get back to a single stream, right? Then I need to merge the stuff so it's no longer partitioned or distributed, right? And so you want it to go back to a single distribution from many distribution. And when you do that, if you want to maintain sortedness, you must merge the sorted sets.
yes.
Which is an operation. I don't think it's in proto, but it's actually in the spec.
Is it?
I believe so. Merging capture.
Oh, merging capture.
Yeah.
Maintain
A
order.
receiving
Okay, yes,
operation that
okay,
will
that makes
merge
sense. So
multiple
if I
ordered
think of it as two
streams.
separate things where but I guess that means, yeah, if you build a sort with a distribution, then it's not really a local sort, it's a distributed sort. And then you need a separate thing to actually guarantee the output is sorted if you care about that. And that way everything is still sort of local.
Yeah. Imagine you're writing Parquet files in parallel,
Mhm.
right? And I want all the Parquet files to be sorted. I can distribute the data by any kind of partitioning scheme. And then I can sort it, and then I can have each stream written to a Parquet file, and all those files are in fact sorted, even though you're not getting to a global sort. Right? You don't need merge and capture in that case.
Okay.
But if you wanted to write them all into a single file and have it be sorted, you would need merge and capture.
That makes sense. And I guess, yeah, the trick then is that like the sort here is sort of logical, but sort of not in some ways.
Sort key is logical. I think you're confusing the distribution and sortedness, like they're like two orthogonal thing. So to get global sort, you need to align those two distributions and sort key align, but doesn't have to be. They're really like independent.
Gotcha. Sort on a distributed set guarantees sorting in the partition.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. That answers that question. Another one.
Yeah. So I mean, regarding that properties, I happen to just stumbled on this hash join operations, and then I found like other physical operators that are, to me, is unnecessarily stronger or too strict. Uh, so I think we need to go over those documentation again and then just clean up those like strong claim that like this has to be in this way or something like that. So hash,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
I remember you noting the inner join dynamic hash join. And I agree with you that I think there definitely needs to be revision there. Yeah, I think there definitely needs to be revision there. I think yeah, if you want to take that up and propose some patches, I think maybe you already have. I don't know. I haven't
yeah,
been that close to this.
that's I think yeah, my agenda after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess taking a step back, so sort that makes sense, but then how does the distribution how is distribution reserved to joins where the property man says distribution is maintained, but I'm like, there's two inputs to the join operation.
Right.
Distribution are we maintaining?
Yes, that part I think I added a comment to the agenda, right? My comment. So that is well, it's not true. So you really need to take account into all the circumstances like join types and so on. For instance, like if you do the like auto joins which produce nulls, then this partitioning is like no longer guaranteed unless you do some extra operations on the output. So we need to revise that as well. Yeah, and it also depends on like whether you are doing broadcast joins or like full repartition joins or yeah. So we need to revise those things.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, as a concrete example of that, I think we added a bunch of join types since we wrote the definitions of this stuff. So
Okay.
yeah, I see there's a long thread here.
Yeah, that one makes sense. Yeah, that one is like, okay, it made sense when we had fewer join types, but then some of the new join types don't preserve partitioning in the way that you'd expect. Like for inner joins, it makes sense. Like, yeah, if you're just, I guess if you're inner joining on the partition key, that's fine. But if you inner join and not the partition on the distribution key, how does that work?
Join on.
Yeah. I mean,
Like-
I think there just needs like there needs to be a lot more definition, right? Because the whole question about like, does a join receive like, is a join accepting multiple partitions on either side, right? Like, so I guess it's not, right? We say like, okay, I'm saying what you're saying.
I can make a note that
Yeah.
I can make a note to revisit or an issue to revisit the property for joins. Maybe an FAQ or a clarification for sorts. Okay. No, that makes sense. As long as the answer is like, yeah, that doesn't make sense, I'm like, cool, okay, I agree. It's understood.
Yeah, I think yeah, like something could be more strict if we wanted to make it more strict than what is possible, right? But I don't think there was a conscious decision. Yeah, I mean, I think that my guess is that was one of those places where we stubbed it out and we never got back to it. Right? Like you're like, okay, let me just write something down, then we'll get back and like revise it. It's never did.
Cool. I guess that's it for me. That answers some of the questions.
Yeah, by the way, like, I'm more than happy to go over those docs and then
yeah,
propose the patches and so yeah.
that'd be great.
So for me, yeah, there are like two PRs waiting for approval. One is like fetch-rel, improving fetch-rel to capturing the explicit sort requirements as well as the with ties. I think Victor approved. I need like one more. I think one more approval. So please take a look if you have a chance. And the other one is the hash join doc that basically dropping this unnecessarily strict sortedness arguments there. So please take a look. In the background, I also like internally we are trying to, I don't know, I'm trying to like sort out type variation usage in my team and sister teams, and that type variation is somewhat like underspecified. So I'm proposing, I mean, I'm writing some draft proposal or basically creating like I'll create an issue to see what are the problems and then we can discuss from there to improve the spec. Yeah, so
Is
that's
the intention clear? Or was the vision clear of type variation?
yeah, I think I mean, from my understanding is essentially this is just, okay, I have a data type, like a logical physical schema design. I have a logical type, I have like n different way to represent it. So let's express that. That's my interpretation. But it is like essentially what I found is it's not like fully specced out. So yeah.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
the type of variation only intended for different representations or for different types?
The primary initial use case was in some engines certain operators can only work on one type variation and not another. Like I can only work on columnar data, I can't work on row-wise data.
Okay.
And so I have integers in both representations, but I can only use certain operators in certain type on certain variations of that.
So for instance, like so I'm working on like SQL Server variation of the product. And so SQL Server, for instance, like date time type is internally it's a, let's say, 64-bit integer, a 64-bit integer, but it has a different meaning. It is based on the 0 means it's a CE year 1 January 1st, while Substrate is a Unix epoch. So that's like one example of the type variation. It's representing like timestamp, but like the values are actually different. Meaning is different. So it's yeah. So that's why we are running into this issue. So we are trying to adopt a substrate internally, and we have like lots of existing types and type variation. But people find that, oh yeah, we can just use it. And then what I found, like after like 6 months, like oh, this going like out of control. So
The other curse thing here is I know that data fusion uses type variations for all of the integer numeric types to represent unsigned versus signed, which is beyond just representation differences. That's like an actual different type.
Yeah, those I feel like that's the thing that's interesting, right? Like, let me use another concrete. Like the intention was physical variations of the same logical type, right? And so another example of this is
Compressed
that
versus not compressed.
compressed versus not compressed. Like in decimal, some systems will, you'll specify a 38,0, but some systems, if it realizes that all of the values can fit in, 4 or 8 bytes instead of 16, will collapse to that.
Mhm.
And so it'll be like a 4-byte decimal type or something like that. So those are examples of things. The timestamp one is an interesting one. I think that's a physical representation. I think it's a good example, right? Like
Yeah.
internally, like 0 happens to mean this instead of meaning that.
Right.
But Substrate
Yeah.
doesn't really care. Yeah. But you need to make sure that if you have code that's going to do it one way and code that's going to do it interpret the other way, that you
Yeah.
convert between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I find the gap. Like so yeah, I'll create the issue and let's discuss it there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
part of the fun, it seems like some of the serialization happens on a per plan basis and not in the extension files.
Mhm.
Like definition of well, I mean, you have to reference the numbers, the type variations, convert them to numbers. That's mirrors the URI section.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's
So
like
that's
one of the
fine.
problem. Yeah, one of the problem. Uh,
Yeah,
The other
there's a
one that's
lot,
a
a
little bit
lot of
confusing
things in
is
that
just how
discussion
you
thread.
express a literal in an alternative physical format. Like it's not.
that I
That's
actually gave up.
I kind of get that. I'm like, should you be able to have a type variation on a literal? I'm thinking maybe you shouldn't.
We could. I mean, we could, but like I think literal having like standard representation has its value. So
Yeah.
I gave up. Other than that, I want something
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
more
no,
performant. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it definitely can be like has a lot. Like I think you're the first ones using it in anger, and so I'm sure that there are a bunch of places where it can be improved or clarified
Yeah.
or yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Those raise a further question for me, which I think we can either talk about later in the agenda or now, which is,
No,
okay,
it's
so
not.
type variations are only for physical type differences. How do we represent signed types in the substrate type system?
It's a new type.
So we need to add new types for all of them.
Sorry, just to clarify, unsigned type just
Or which one do we have now?
we have
We have
signed, we don't
signed.
have
Right,
unsigned.
unsigned, yeah.
Yeah, those are just new types.
Okay, so we need like UI.
Like
Okay.
And then we have to come up with the abbreviation, all the abbreviations and stuff for them, like U32 and probably instead of UI 32, I would guess.
is there enough use of unsigned types that we think that it should be a first class type
Arrow
as opposed to
has
extension type?
the ability to represent them in systems at 4 hour.
I know Arrow has all sorts of stuff that Arrow doesn't use.
Or I guess more
Like
precisely,
arrow added types too quickly.
this came up for me because we mentioned that type variations are intended for the different representations of types, and I'm like, data fusion is using it definitely not for that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Yeah, I
it's
know. If you
self-consistent. No one else can read those. No one else reads those variations, but they're using it to encode signed versus unsigned, and I'm like, if that's not what it's supposed to be doing, then
yeah.
we haven't specified
Yeah.
it enough, and we should probably not let them do that.
Yeah, the range thing is an interesting one, right? Because the way that types are defined is it's a physical variation, but the range should be the same. Now we haven't been super strict about range. I don't know that it even makes sense to be super strict about range, right? But like when we define like timestamp, we say that the timestamp can be between this date and that date,
Well,
right?
yeah, but then the physical variation of that we were talking about before for timestamp. If the zeros are different, the range is different.
Yeah, no, that's what I agree. That's what I was asking. That was the question that I was posing, which
Yeah.
is what are the dynamics around range? Now, there's a separate question, which is that if the range of the underlying system is above the range that is proposed in substrate, is it reasonable for the system to use that type? Probably. Right. It's different if the range of the physical variation is narrower than what substrate declares the range to be allowed.
So
That
you
being
could
said, it feels academic almost. Like how much is this actually going to impact anybody who's doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this because I am actually looking into this issue. Uh, so for instance, like again, like datetime. T-SQL, transact-SQL datetime is basically have like wider range than substrate type because substrate the minimum is year 1000 while T-SQL minimum is year one. So, but I find it like I think it's fine. Basically, as long as we are remaining in so from substrate type to our type variant is fine. From the variant to substrate type, there can be a problem. But in our scenario, it is okay because it's always going to like one direction, so it's not a big problem. Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah, the signed one is the one where I think it's like more like data fusion's like I assuming just means that they're blowing past the size, the range that's allowed in those types.
yeah.
Right. If you do an unsigned and a signed type, you're just going to run out of space halfway through, right? Um, yeah. I mean, so what happens when you hand data fusion a large unsigned number and then say put it in substrate? Does it just blow up?
It's a literal.
Yeah. Or is it just turn it into a negative number?
It probably turns it into a negative number, would be my guess.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, if it's internally consistent, it probably does that. And it's like, yeah, it works fine. Round trip's great. Like,
Mhm. It's just not operable or um, yeah.
so I was glancing at the fetch PR that you had next on the
Yes, yes,
agenda.
yeah.
The one thought I had here, I'm a mixed mind because I'm like so like all SQL stuff. If you didn't learn it, if it came later, you didn't know about it. I didn't know with ties exists. Um,
Mhm, mhm,
uh, I believe that the
mhm.
statement is that all tied records get counted as one or many. Is that the
No,
meaning
well,
of the
the
of with
semantic
ties?
is applies. So basically, the mode is if your input row, if your input to this fetch whatever has
Mhm.
like less than n, you'll get all n row, no matter what the ties. If you have more than n, and the nth row or nth row and n plus one row happens to have this tie in terms of the sort key, then you will get that n plus one row. and that this repeats until you capture all the tie row of the last one. So it could, if like you have like 1,000 more rows, but they are all tie, you will get like 1,000 more.
It's only the last row. It's
Only the last row, yes. Only the last row.
how does so hold on a second. And that only applies. Sorry.
So if you wanted to do a top 10 chart, you could have 8 people that were they were the 10th place because they all tied for 10th place.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I get that. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to think for a moment here about does it apply to both offset and limit?
No. Well, it applies to the limit.
It doesn't apply to offset.
It doesn't apply to offset. You skip that many row, and then from that point you're starting to like yielding rows, and then the last
And
row
it's only
you have
the
time.
terminal condition on the last row.
Correct. Yeah.
So you could be in the middle of your top. If you skip 10, you could be in the middle of that previously top 10
Yes.
ties.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
your ties or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were
So
doing a
here's the
page
question.
system, you'd probably want it to skip return the stuff after the offset would be with ignoring the top 10, the ties for the start point, and then continue on and then go. But yeah.
So the main question that I had reading this was, how do we make it as accessible as possible to people who aren't working on databases but are working on, say, data frame libraries, where they're not steeped in the latest SQL stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like just to make it more descriptive, like I'm not like it's just like, you know, like with ties
Mhm.
is, you know, kind of very SQL centric. And so it's like,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not like really familiar with the data frame, but
yeah, I'm saying trying to make
yeah.
it more of can we make it a more layman descriptive?
Look, if
Like-
you were building the protobuf directly, not via SQL, via like some builder being like, oh, I want to make a fetch rel with like, what is this with ties thing?
So like, for example, just being like, you know, include ties on last row, right? Or
Okay.
on last limit row or something like that. Like I'm trying to think about like, how do we make it as
Mhm.
accessible as possible for people who are not, that are like
I
me
see.
and don't know the SQL concept. So
So are you suggesting to renaming the field or just updating the documentations?
I think probably both.
Both. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if you, it's like, how do you just structure this in a way that it's a guide for someone who is not
Mhm.
who's less close to this.
Okay. So in okay. So include that's really long name for a field.
Yeah. I don't know what the right thing is. Like
Yeah.
I'm like but it's just like you know, like it's only related to limit,
Mhm.
right? Not to offset,
Right. Yeah.
right? So um like as an example, right? Like making it be limit boundary condition enumeration, like an enum of limit boundary condition,
Mhm.
where it's like ignore ties or include ties.
Mhm.
Um,
That's actually a good idea. Yeah. So having
something, I don't know. I'm brainstorming here. I don't know exactly, but something that's like, hey, this is this. If I was just a programmer and I'm not a SQL guy, like,
Mhm.
how would I write this in a program?
I see.
I see where you're coming from. It would be nicer if you could be like, go, you can look at the protobuf doc. It's not like, go, here, go read the SQL spec to understand what this is.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I like the idea of the using enum instead. Yeah.
Why is there an addition of sorts fields?
Hmm. This has to do with locality. I think Young Troll, you can explain that. So I think you
Right.
did.
Yeah. So this with tie can only define you have like specific sort order. So with tie is implicitly, I mean, requires a sort. So it is defined under the like specific sort key. So in previously in Substrate, so well, yeah, I mean, if you want to like order by limit,
Yeah. I get it.
yeah,
I'm just trying
yeah,
to
I
think
mean,
about.
we are assuming the whatever this thing is input is delivering
It's a
whatever.
sorted set. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
So
was some discussion like
yeah,
2 meetings ago, if you want to catch up on that.
yeah.
Mm.
So instead of that, basically I'm trying to unify that. So if you really need that sort of requirements, like logically, you just capture that in the fetch. So and then we can basically clearly like this logical operation actually requires sort. Uh, rather than, oh yeah, this limit, do I have actually required sort below, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a much clearly express the intent of the operation.
It is awkward because it sort of does end up being redundant with sort rel. But I think I look at it and I'm also starting to understand why calcite includes the limit by property or combines order by and limit into a single relational node exactly for this stuff like this.
Yeah, if you like keep rolling in stuff, like yeah, eventually sort gets like everything.
Yeah. That's yeah. No, I mean, like to me, it's
Yeah.
like if you think about sortedness as a physical property, then you don't need to define sort on fetch row.
True, but this is like a logical operation, especially with ties.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
no, that's true.
this logically captures that sort of thing.
I know. But you remember there is no logical physical boundary in substrate, right?
And I
That's
guess
yeah.
like ideally every consumer would be able to tell like, oh, there is now I've read a sort and there's a limit. Well, the sort defines defines an ordering based on the substrate rules. You must maintain
So
it
so,
for
so
the rest.
here's the question for you.
Mhm.
You've done it one direction. I'm wondering if it should be done the other direction, which might be more intuitive for people. You did it where you basically said, I'm importing sort into fetch, right? The other way to do it would be to import fetch into sort.
Fetch into sort. So basically extending
Like put the offset and limit in sort. Like if the width limits only applies to a sorted operation, right? Then add limit and fetch into sort.
I that
Limit and offset.
limit
I'm
offset.
just thinking about it from the perspective of like, like that's how, for example, calcite does it, right? So calcite says, hey, I'm pretty sure calcite does it. It's offset
Yeah, it
That's
does. That's what
what
I was talking
in
about.
sort
Jesus
operation.
told me that like, oh, I don't understand like why why um I mean, yeah, that's certainly an option to
Yeah,
like moving this to sort.
the other suggestion I had, I think was either having explicit type hints or sorted or orderedness hints that you could say, and you could by fiat say this was sorted this way. Like, oh, I read this from disk and I expect the sorted to be this as an orderedness hint, where sorting is explicitly order it this way. An ordering hint would be basically this should be ordered this way, but if it's not, go deal with it.
Yeah, no. I'm contemplating there's two different ways to think about this is whether it's like, okay, it really should be composed as it should be a single thing, right? Because the way to do this that would be the lighter weight version of this is to only support field references, right? To say that like these three fields define tiedness, right? Because with ties doesn't require, it's not sort based, right? Conceptually speaking, like an algebraic level. It's not sort based. It's which fields having equality define the edge condition, right? Like if the next set of records has these three
Sure.
fields the same as the previous set of records, then it's the same, right? And we include that in the as a
Yeah,
time.
that is yeah, that actually I called this for the language lawyer, that the SQL language lawyer, that I gave what's the like real definition of order by fetch with ties, and what's the final output order. I intuitively think this should be, the result should be ordered by the order by, but I don't know, like someone may claim that why?
The thing about splitting it up
Why?
as well, even if it's only field references, that you build the plan being like there's a sort followed by my limit with the field references only, and then I as a system might start moving those around. And if I'm smart enough, I know that I have to. I know that there's a dependency between the sort ordering here, but I
Well,
might.
let's use a concrete. Actually, here's a better concrete example of this, right? Is by coupling it with sort field. If the data is underlying data is already sorted by this thing, then how do I express a efficient plan that is applying with ties behavior but doesn't resort the data? Because you
Well,
really only need to apply the equality condition on the limit edge, right? So it's actually like best case scenario, you run it one comparison of two records. Let's say it's a billion record stream that's sorted, pre-sorted, right? It's written to some place where it's pre-sorted, right? And I want to do a compare, and I do with ties. So
yeah.
I need to apply that condition on the one limit, the one record, and the record right afterwards.
Yeah.
And so the best case scenario is that I do one comparison between two rows. The worst case scenario is I do comparisons until I hit the edge condition,
Yeah.
but I never have to do any sort.
So this whatever, I mean, this sort is more of like a required sort, and it doesn't have to be implemented in that way. But as you said, like there's no distinction between logical and physical. That I yeah, there's
Yeah. Well, what I'm wondering whether or not is that like if it is only for the purpose of tie, I'm gonna step back and say I don't have a strong opinion about this. I was trying to think about like what is the like the smallest version of this, if you will.
Mhm.
And I think it is with ties with field references, equality fields. These are the fields that define tie, right? Like tiedness. It's these fields 1, 3, and 7 define tiedness on my limit condition, my limit edge page.
But uh, but I think, well, that is like from fetch perspective, but the semantically it still requires sort.
You end up with like a sort followed by a limit.
No,
And then
only in SQL.
Only in SQL, yes, only in SQL.
Yeah, only in SQL. Like if I'm building some plan and I want to say, hey, I want to limit myself to 10 records. I want to get 10 records, but if you know, like
Sure, yeah. I mean,
field
so
is the same, like I
right.
want to
So
keep having it until it's
to
field.
implement the SQL semantic, essentially we have to really exercise this SQL semantic, we have to put explicit sort below. This sort may disappear. And then on top of that, there will be this like fetch route.
Yeah.
There's a question between like, yeah, I mean, do we really require that or not?
Well, yeah. So the reason I'm asking the question, like, there's two reasons, which is one is that like so like there's a spectrum, right? There is a logical physical spectrum,
Yeah,
right? And that's why we have join and hash join, right?
yes.
And so part of what my question was is when someone's sitting down who's working with Substrate and they're trying to write a Substrate plan and they
Mhm.
have a SQL plan which has a limit,
Mhm.
right? What are they going to write? And I think it'll be confusing if they're like, well, should I use fetch rel or should I use sort rel and fetch rel? Like I'm just trying to think about putting myself in that set of shoes, right? I know that that's been confusing inside of Calcite. I've heard that question multiple times, where you're like, "What's going on?" Now, if you use Calcite's parser, then Calcite makes a decision for you with SQL to rel, so it's not the same. Like you don't have that decision, but if you're trying to work from some other system, you do. And so I'm just trying to think about it, like, is there a composite and then like a decomposed, right? Like, should we put offset and fetch and sort together in something because that's good for expressing intention, right? And then there's a separate concept which is like the sort of smaller decomposition of that, which expresses these sort of more nuanced concepts like equality of limit on the limit fields, right?
Yeah.
I guess circling back, this kind of came up with like what
Yeah, I
proposed
mean,
initially was, what if we, instead of having a limit with a sort, what if we move the limit stuff into sort? Which I'm actually thinking about it would be kind of nice because we also have a top n concept, which is redundant in the face of sort with limit on it, effectively. Like we could combine the top n thing that we have into sort with limit.
Do we have a top n?
Not in the physical relation portion of the website, yes, but not in the algebra or in the protobuf. But like, yes, like top n, like that top n operation becomes redundant if we just have sort rel with limit and offset on it. You can represent your top n via that effectively. I mean, even better question might be, do we merge limit stuff into sort and then deprecate the fetch rel entirely? It'd be like, actually, you should just use the sort rel for this. The reason it comes up is like there's very specific operations that we want to be able to support that require this to happen.
I don't think most systems, I mean, I'm curious in the case of SQL Server, but I don't think most systems in the physical land actually implement those as the single operation. Like efficient sorting, like the way that I've done this in systems in the past is actually is that something like sort will propagate a change indicator. And so each new equality set, if you want to call it that, will mark a row as saying like, hey, this is the next step in the equality set that a downstream operator physically will use. Right? Like, because you don't want to do the comparison twice, right? Like, you know you're going to do the with ties. Then when you're doing the comparisons, also track whether these two rows are the same, right? So you could track that, but that's simply an indication bit that then fetches, because you're not going to do, well, top n is different.
I guess I don't think we're going to resolve this in the next 7 minutes. Should we continue this in the ticket? And then David, I think you had a couple quick items you wanted to get through.
Yeah.
Let me say one thing is I do think that I am attracted to the idea of the composite being the top n operation because we already defined that in the spec. We don't have it in the proto, but if we're going to do a composition one, which includes both concepts, I'm inclined to put it in top n rather than in fetch or in sort. Like if top n is already defined, I was just reading it, like it's already defined as sort plus fetch, right? So let's put with ties in that rather than and keeping sort and fetch the same. And if we decide ultimately to deprecate for it and sort and fetch, I think that would be okay.
Wait a second. So isn't top n, is it like logical or physical? Or there's like no distinction?
Physical. Yeah, I mean, it's in the physical grouping, which is funny because it feels more like a logical concept, but it's also got a physical benefit. So that's why I feel like logical physical is very, very fuzzy.
Yeah, but also like with ties is logical in my head.
With time, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, see, this is why there's no logical physical distinction at the end of the day, because you're like it's very subjective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have like too strong bias to SQL land and also like where like logical physical is pretty distinct. Okay, so let me just iterate on the idea of like composability and so on, and send another iteration. Okay, yeah.
David, yeah, work items.
All right, yeah, a bunch of items. Got a notice yesterday that DuckDB will be breaking the substrate extension is 122. Well, if there's like a CMake has to be updated or something. So I'll look at that. It shouldn't be too bad. Um, uh, things that DuckDB substrate isn't passing TPCH. I think that's you sort of realize that when Pedro closed one of the things he had that he was working on. We have the operators that we added, but we haven't actually gotten the um, delimiter joins for DuckDB working, and that requires needs some effort on the substrate thing. So that's another epic that needs work. I don't have it currently scheduled, but that's that. I'm still working on rewriting the substrate text plan stuff. AI, I tried using AI and it did a pretty poor job actually. So I'm fixing a lot of stuff. But getting there. So still some time. We need up the I referred to the video from two times ago, and that's not up. I think that might be.
That's definitely why I haven't seen it.
I don't think I recorded that one. So yeah, Victor, do you have the ability to upload videos?
I do. Let me check to see if it's in my Zoom cloud. I'll follow up on that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice if when we're talking about access to videos, uploading videos, it'd be nice. But I think since it's your Zoom, that makes it harder.
Automating some kind of integration between
That would be an alternative.
my
Yes.
corporate Zoom. Sorry, no, I think automated videos like it's my corporate Zoom account versus my personal Google account, which has access to the Substrate YouTube. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I went through. I ended up just giving access to my personal account or to my corporate account when I was up doing things because that's fine. Where you lose access to it, you lose access to it. We can revoke it.
Cool.
So that's fine. And last is precision timestamp. I mentioned it. Literals don't have the storage of time zone, and I mentioned it before to a number of people. I think using the INA time zones probably is reasonable. I do want the capability. I think it might be nice to have the capability of having just the offset and not the names as well. But I'm not quite sure about that.
Well, there are INA names for all the offsets.
Oh, okay. So then that would work.
So they're like, I mean, it's like a standard structured format. I don't know what it is, like plus.
Then I can look at it further. But yeah, that's one of those other things that needs to be fixed. I noticed that somebody in Data Fusion or I forget if it's Data Fusion or it's in Substrate Java is trying to add trying to fix up all the time stuff. And then of course they're using the broken timestamp literal. It's not gonna it means we have to come back and fix it later. Anyway, I've got places to be in a minute. I think that's it.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.